Hey there, and welcome to this explainer. So, today, we're going to embark on a pretty wild journey into the hidden duality of the human mind. We're unlocking a really profound psychological concept known as the shadow. Think of it as this dark, silent twin that's walking right behind you all the time. And honestly, once you understand how this shadow works, it might just completely change the way you see yourself and literally everyone around you.
Let's start things off with a pretty provocative question right out of the gate. Why do good people do terrible things? Like, why do people who seem perfectly polite, highly moral, totally in control of their lives, why do they suddenly explode with irrational anger or do something completely out of character? Well, this question gets right to the absolute heart of the chaotic, hidden behaviors we see out there in the world, and, if we're being truly honest with ourselves, the behaviors we sometimes witness in our own lives too.
Okay, let's dive into this with Section 1, the mystery of the double, the ego and the shadow.
So, the famed psychologist Carl Jung proposed that as we grow up, we develop an inseparable pair, the ego and the shadow. It's brilliantly illustrated by that classic 19th century story of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Dr. Jekyll, right, he represents our conscious ego. He's polite, moral, bathed in this socially acceptable light. But right alongside him, developing at the exact same time, is Mr. Hyde, the unconscious shadow. This is the untamed darkness where we hide all the traits that just don't fit our shiny public image. The thing is, the ego and the shadow develop together. You literally cannot have the light without casting a shadow.
Moving right along to Section 2, our invisible bag, carrying the repressed self. There's this poet, Robert Bly, who gives us a really profound analogy for how this works. He suggests that as infants, we start out as this massive 360-degree ball of radiant energy. We just freely express absolutely everything. But, to survive and to get love, we systematically start slicing off our unacceptable parts. Like if our parents reject our anger, we slice it off and stuff it into this invisible bag that we drag behind us. We go to school, and if teachers reject our impulsivity or loudness, boom, into the bag it goes. In adulthood, society might reject our vulnerability, so we stuff that in too. By the time we hit midlife, we've been dragging this bag around for decades. It's incredibly heavy, it's bursting at the seams with all this unlived life. And often, well, the bag bursts.
Now, the really crucial point here is understanding the sheer psychological logic of what happens inside that bag. Because when you repress an unacceptable trait, it doesn't just poof, disappear. Energy is never destroyed, right? Instead, sitting there in the dark isolation of your unconscious, that trait actually regresses to a barbaric, primitive state. So if you put a little bit of healthy anger into the bag when you're 5 years old, by age 40, it hasn't stayed 5-year-old anger. It's devolved into this raging, primitive monster, just waiting to unexpectedly explode into your life.
Just think about this number for a second, 360. We're born with 360 degrees of radiant, dynamic personality. But by the time we're, say, 20 years old, we are left with just a thin, socially acceptable sliver of that original self. The vast majority of who we actually are is locked away in the dark. Let's move to Section 3, the psychic projector, seeing the self in others.
So this hidden bag of regress traits, it doesn't just sit there quietly. Jungian analyst Marie-Louise von Franz suggests the human mind actually acts like a massive movie projector. This is the concept of projection. It's the unconscious act of taking our own unloved, repressed traits, basically those old film reels from our invisible bag, and shining them directly onto the screens of other people. We literally see our own darkness, our own unlived lives, walking around in the faces of the people around us.
It's super fascinating to see how you can spot your own psychic projector running in everyday life. Like, notice these signs. If you feel this exaggerated, intense anger at someone else's flaws, or this inexplicable, powerful aversion to someone you barely even know, it's highly likely that's your own shadow firing a magic arrow. It's just finding a hook in someone else to hang your baggage on. And actually, it's not just negative stuff. Obsessive idolization of a celebrity or a hero, that can be you projecting your own unlived brilliance and power. Even humorous slips, cruel jokes, or, laughing when someone falls on a banana peel, those are tiny little moments of your shadow slipping out to have a quick laugh. All right, let's zoom out a bit for Section 4, Society's Dark Stage, the Collective Shadow.
The famous comic strip character Pogo once declared, "We have met the enemy and he is us." And man, that perfectly anchors the concept of the collective shadow. Because what happens when an entire culture shines its psychic projectors at the exact same time?
When huge groups of people all agree to stuff the exact same traits into their invisible bags, the resulting societal projector is massive. Instead of looking inward at our own flaws, societies create scapegoats. We're constantly looking for an enemy out there to blame for our own collective unrest. When we look neutrally at history, we see the tragic mechanics of this collective shadow everywhere. Nations systematically project the image of an evil empire onto their geopolitical rivals. Religious groups project the label of heretics onto outsiders. Societies project the idea of subhumans onto minorities. These overlapping webs of projected shadows create a pretty terrifying stage for humanity, actively fueling the contagious mechanisms of prejudice, racism, and war. Simply put, it's a lot easier to try and destroy the evil out there than to admit it exists right inside ourselves.
Now let's explore Section 5, Gold in the Compost, the Golden Shadow.
Up until now, I know, the shadow sounds purely terrifying, but I want you to think of your shadow like a compost pile. Yes, okay, it's full of rotting, messy stuff like destructive impulses, but buried deep within that rich, dark compost lies the fertilizer for your absolute greatest potential. Psychologists call this the golden shadow. This includes your lost vitality, your wild creativity, your unused talents, your childlike spontaneity. By aggressively cutting off the parts of ourselves we thought were bad, we also severed our connection to the deeply authentic, powerful parts of who we are. If you feel like you aren't a creative person, it might just mean you stuffed your creativity into your invisible bag a really long time ago.
Which brings us to this ultimate psychological paradox, where we finally see the shadow's true function within the whole. The shadow is both the terrifying receptacle of darkness and the hidden savior of our wholeness. We literally cannot be complete without it. If we ever want to rediscover our true, authentic, 360-degree humanity, we have to willingly climb down into our own dark compost pile and reclaim that golden energy we left behind.
And finally, Section 6, Turning the Projector Off, Integrating the Dark Twin.
So how do we actually do this? How do we integrate this dark twin and get our energy back? Well, it's incredibly difficult but immensely rewarding logical work. Step 1. Notice your exaggerated, intense reactions to others. When you feel that totally irrational hatred for someone, catch yourself. Your ego is going to hate this, and you might feel a bit embarrassed, but notice it. Step 2. Withdraw the projection. Literally turn off the movie projector and replace it with a mirror. And step 3, accept that the repressed trait you're reacting to actually lives within you. When you consciously acknowledge this dark twin, it completely loses its demonic, autonomous power over you.
Honestly, when you synthesize all these symbols together, it's kind of humorous, in a slightly tragic way, isn't it? We're all just people walking around, dragging these invisible bags of compost, aggressively shining psychic movie projectors at each other's faces, and then looking around wondering why the world is so chaotic. It's a beautiful, lighthearted way to reinforce just how wonderfully, brilliantly messy human psychology truly is.
And understanding that gives us this incredibly empowering global vision. The limits for changing the world actually start right inside your own mind. When we do the hard work of facing our own shadows, we stop adding our own personal venom to the collective darkness. So I'm going to leave you with this final thought. Are you brave enough to open your invisible bag and finally meet your dark twin? Thank you so much for hanging out with me on this explainer. I really hope you've learned something transformative today.